Hello and welcome back to XVD Bibles. My name is Ethan. So today we're going to be continuing my series on how to rebind a Bible from start to finish, and this will be part 3. And I was kind of thinking about the content of my previous 2 videos as I was editing them, and this isn't getting into the fun part yet. I really like doing the spine stamping and the hub tooling and all of that. So if you just bear with me here, we'll get to the fun stuff here really soon. But you can't have a beautiful final product unless you put in the time to get these preparatory stages done really well. Things like measuring, things like block preparation, things like dyeing the page edges, etc. So today we're going to be covering maybe one of the more difficult parts of Bible rebinding, and that is some measuring and some math and some cutting of the liner material and cutting the cover material. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Jump right in. So this is the same exact block that I used in part 2. I have not done anything else to this Bible. I've only let it dry fully. It's been a couple days since I've touched this block, but the Oxford Hollow is obviously still there. I haven't done anything to this other than let it fully dry. So I've already done a how-to video on how I measure for Bible rebinding. So, definitely consult that video. It isn't one of my earlier videos. I think it was one of my first 10 videos, but I still use that same exact technique, and it hasn't steered me wrong yet. So, so we'll go ahead and start on it here. So I format I have this notebook here of all of my Bible rebind measurements that I've ever made, and I started doing this really early on, and it's really served me in the long run for a number of reasons. If I am just starting out, like let's say I'm within my first 10 rebinds, and I notice in the final product that I make some weird mistakes with measuring, with cutting, etc. I need to know, and you need to know if you're learning, where that mistake was made in order to correct that mistake next time. So every one of my rebinds, I have 60 rebinds worth of, I think about 60 rebinds worth of measurements and math in this notebook. And if I detect that I have some kind of weird issue in my final product, I will consult my notes and find where that mistake was made, and I will correct it next time. So that's why I kind of record everything. And another reason why I do it this way is that I do some non-commissioned projects sometimes, and I like, as this one is. And if I have a bunch of measurements for a bunch of different text blocks on hand, just on hand, ready for me to consult, I can know that if I have a scrap piece of leather that's 14 inches, 14 inches by 8 inches, I can consult my notebook and determine, okay, if I want to get, I know that if I consult my notebook, I can tell, okay, I know that a ESV personal reference will fit that piece of leather because I already have, all of those measurements on hand. So, I like, just perpetually, keeping those measurements on hand. So, let's go ahead and get started here. Having some issues with my focusing, so we'll just go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and, just get into it. So rebind number, and this is a CSB reference Bible. So the 2 measurements that I keep here are, I'm going to take a height measurement, and I'm going to take what I call a long measurement. So this is the ruler that I like using, and this ruler has don't know why I'm having so many focusing issues here. But this ruler is made by Victor, and I really like it because it has all of the actual fraction markings on it. And this is just, for my eyes, this is the best ruler in order for me to make sure I get the measurements right. So here, I'm going to take a height measurement first, and this is the height of the text block. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the height of this text block is 8 1/4. And let me go ahead and get my tailor's tape here. So it took me like 40 or so rebinds to cut my tailor's tape down. Because, these tailor's tapes come, I think this one was like a 48-inch tailor's tape, and I just ended up cutting it because I never used that last bit of it. So the trick with this is you want to wrap your tailor's tape around the text block, and if you're kind of on the line, just round up to like the next 16th. So this is looks like 12. $12 1/4. Let's call that 12 1/4. And 1/4. Okay. So let's go ahead and do some math here. So 12 1/4 here, and then 8 1/4 here. So if you're just starting out, one thing that you need to do to these measurements that I've covered in my previous video is that you need to add just a little bit for the tabs. And I can explain why you need to do this. So, and this applies to like the hub backing material. So your hub backing material and your cover, you need to compensate for the tabs. So I can explain why that is. So let's say this is the text block. This is the spine. This is these are like the end sheets here. So the way your cover is going to work is that your cover is obviously going to wrap over your spine and, come down here. So this is going to be your cover leather here. So in order to get your cover to the end of your cover here and here, geez, I can't draw on camera. In order to get your cover leather here and here to perfectly fall where you want it at the end of your text block, you need to compensate for your liner tabs. So this first line right here is the cover leather, but of course underneath is the tab leather or the liner leather. And this tab here is essentially like bent. It is bent like right here where the, I'm having trouble explaining this. So again, this first line here is your cover leather. This is your liner, and your tabs are bent where your end sheets meet your spine. And this little flap section here, the tab, effectively adds width to your text block that you need to compensate for on each side. And the amount that you add is dependent upon the thickness of your liner. So if you use a thicker liner, you are going to need to add more to compensate for that in order for the edges of your cover to fall where you want it on the edges of your text block. So if you're making a Bible cover and you don't do this, your outside edge is going to be consistently short shorter than what you want. So your height measurements, because that tab doesn't affect your height and your top and your bottom measurements, your top and your bottom measurements are going to be accurate, but your outside measurement is going to be wonky. So that's why you need to add a little bit for the tab. I think that's the best way to explain it. So there's some slight differing opinions on how much you need to add. But if you're just starting out, I would recommend starting with 3/16. So if you're using a liner like I do, that is between like 0.6 millimeters, between 0.6 millimeters and let's say like 0.9 millimeters, you're going to want to go with about a 3/16 addition to your long measurement here. If your liner is super thin and less than 0.6 millimeters, I would say, you might be able to get away with, 1/8, but I would recommend starting with 3/16. And obviously there are other factors that will affect like whether whether like the edge of your cover will fall where it needs to on the edge of your text block. Like if you don't properly install your cover tightly if you don't properly install your text block tightly to the spine area of your cover, and your text block is essentially like sitting too far forward and not hugging this area right here, then this right here is going to be messed up. So hopefully that makes sense. I've done this a lot at this point, and I don't often explain it. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone out there. So let's go ahead and get started here with the calculation. So I always do 3/16 to my long measurement, and I don't need to add 3/16 to my short measurement because we've already gone over that. So then to your long measurement and your short measurement, you need to compensate for your yapp. So for this Bible, I was thinking before this video what yapp I wanted to do. So I think I'm just going to go with like a standard, actually. So it just occurred to me. So this is one of my rebinds that I finished recently, and I really like the yapp measurement that I used on this Bible because and I went over this in the video for this Bible. So the fold over falls like really at the perfect place for this length of yapp. So since I've kept my measurements and I like this final product, I'm going to do that same yapp measurement on this, this CSB here. So let's go with that. So where's that Bible? Oh yeah, ESV 56, Rebind number 56. So my the yapp edition that I used here, and here I even say very, very good yapp. So let's go with 11/16 for my yapp edition. This needs to be added to both sides. And this number is just how much yapp you want times 2. So standardly on like most Bibles, if people don't specify, I do 3/8 of an inch of yapp, which ends up being like 3/4 of an inch of addition here. So yeah, so let's go with 11/16. And for the past maybe 25 Bibles, I have used ChatGPT to do all of my math, and that has been super helpful. So just know when you use something like AI to do math, it does occasionally make mistakes. But if you prompt it in a way to double check its answer, I've never had an issue with ChatGPT getting like a simple fraction addition question wrong when you tell it to double check the answer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on my computer and show you a screenshot of what that looks like and how I prompt, ChatGPT. So be right back. All right, I'm back. So I ended up having to use Gemini because ChatGPT was kind of being dumb right now. So it wasn't giving me like wrong answers or anything. It just wasn't taking my input for some reason. So yeah, 12 and 1/4 plus 3/16 plus 11/16 is 13 and 1/8, and 8 and 1/4 plus 11/16 is 8 and 15/16. Okay, so this is going to be my exact liner measurement, but it's not going to be my exact cover measurement because I need to add about 5/16 on every edge for my leather that's going to fold over my liner. So we can go ahead and start working on our liner here. All right, I gave us a higher angle here so you can see how I do this. So this is our measurement here, 13 and 1/8 by 8 and 15/16. So this is Napa lambskin from District Leathers. It's one of the sources that I use for leather. One of the sources. I use a few. District Leather is really good. Their Napa lambskin is really high quality. I also use Rocky Mountain Leather. I use Buy Leather Online. So I use a bunch of different ones. So when you do this, you want to avoid at least some serious wrinkles and warping in your hide here. So there is some of that right here. So I generally want to avoid that. But this other area, looks pretty good. So the other thing I want to do is verify there are no defects in this area. So looks good. So, one thing I didn't check is whether I had a working... Yeah, I can see that all right. So we can use a black marker here, or a black pen. So this is a quilting. This is a 1 foot by 1 foot acrylic quilting square. And I use this in lieu of a rafting square because I think I'm able to get better, right angles with this thing. So this is what I've been using, and it's been working great. So obviously this isn't for measuring because there's not 16ths measurement marks on here. It's just for, just for right angles. So, all right. So I do want to situate this not super close to that wrinkly area, but I think this will be a good spot. So the way I do this is I start with a right angle, and I start with a right angle that I know is right, and then I work around that right angle to make sure that I have right angles all the way around. So if you start working with leather a lot, you'll quickly realize that we've come a long way in the way of technology in 2025, but there is a very noticeable lack of really high quality like leather marking tools. So the best pens that I've found to mark on leather are these ones. So these are Pentel Jetstream pens. These are super cheap. Pentel Jetstream, specifically the 0.7 millimeters, are really great for marking on leather. Obviously, if your leather is like really, really dark black, then you're going to have an issue. But I've gone through a bunch of different types of pens, gel pens, gel pens, roller balls. Mechanical pencils don't work that well, but I've found that these Jetstream pens are really the way to go. And it's actually a recommendation that I think it's Bibles by Drew mentioned on his channel. So Yeah, definitely Jetstream pens are the way to go. So that's a nice mark. Um, a nice mark there, and we can definitely work with that. So I'm gonna kind of orient this around here to have this more in front of me. So Napa lambskin isn't the easiest leather to work with because it is pretty stretchy. So just be aware of that. If you notice your your markings seem to kind of drift, that's most likely why. But if you have a really good quality, so if you're using like a good quality lambskin, you're going to have some stretch to it, but not, that much. But if you pair it with a cover leather that's not stretchy, that's generally a good combination to use. So sometimes I orient my measurements off of my 1 inch mark instead of my 0 mark because it's sometimes easier for me to see. So that's what I was doing there. I wasn't being a doofus. All right. Man, I cannot see that mark very well. Let's try this. Oh yeah. Okay. So marking is super important. And the old military adage, like aim small, miss small, is definitely applies for something like this. So the smaller your marks are, the narrower your pens, and the more accurate your measurements are, the more accurate your final product's going to be. And especially if you want to do like really narrow yapp Bibles, like if you want to make a Bible that has like a 1/4 inch yapp, 1/4 inch fold over, type of Bible like that is definitely more of like a novice level project and requires a lot of accuracy. So just be aware of that. So one of the reasons why I really like these quilting squares is, especially the larger one, is obviously, I mean, they are very accurate right angles. I was using a rafting square for a little while and realized that the outside right angle was not a true right angle, and I ditched it. But I've confirmed by multiple measuring methods that this quilting square is right angles all the way around. And I like this too because this quilting square you can put some pressure on it, and you can ensure that you're going to get nice straight lines because sometimes leather is kind of wobbly. So yeah. So we're going to go ahead and confirm that this measurement here is what we want. So looks good. So in order for me to better manage this hide, I am going to rough cut it. And I use a rotary cutter for this really soft lambskin. So, and this is a really nice one. This is by the company called Olfa, and it's the 60 millimeter one. I had a really tiny one at some point, but it didn't like mount the blade very solidly, and because it was such a smaller blade, it dulled really fast. So I really like the 60 millimeter ones. All right, so I am going to confirm some of my measurements here just to make sure things are right, because there is a little bit of kind of rippling here. So looks good to me. So in my experience, you really can't spend too long. Like there's no if you go and double check your measurements like 4 or 5 times, that never hurts. I have learned to do that, and it has served me pretty well. So, and I will say when you go to cut this stuff, it does take some skill using one of these rotary cutters, because you have to, with a rotary cutter like this, you have a tendency to like roll it off of the ruler. So you really always want to make sure that your rotary cutter is perfectly flush with the ruler as you do your stroke, because you do not want this drifting. I've messed up liners that way before. So and when I do this, I flip my ruler upside down because I like how it grips the leather better. My my cutter drifted off of my ruler just a little bit, so I'm gonna see here. So on this side, I do have a little bit of extra, so that's not a big deal. So what I'm gonna do is So what I can do is take about 1/32 of an inch off of this line to make sure that it's a nice line. So let's see. There we go. That looks good. Perfect. Crisis averted. All right, so before we go and start working with our cover leather, I'm going to dry fit this liner to make sure that it looks right. Before you go and cut your, so I use my liner as a template for my cover leather, and I want to make sure that template is accurate. Looks great. Now on to our cover leather. All right, so this is going to be our cover leather for this Bible. This is the legendary Horween Chrome XL. This is navy blue. This leather has been thinned to 0.8 millimeters, and this will be a perfect liner leather cover for us. So obviously when you go to do this, you want to make sure there are no, defects or ugly spots in your leather. And this one definitely looks good to me. I'm going to take my watch off because this leather scratches really easily. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So I use my liner as a template for, I use my liner as a template for my cover leather. So the way I do that is I just situate my liner leather over my cover leather, like so. And I want this to be real flat. So what I do, I can use this. This will be good. So you obviously want to weigh this down and make sure it doesn't move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make little marks on either side of each corner, and then I'm going to trace, straight lines in between. So let's go ahead and do that here. Do I want to do that? Let's do it like this. So this will be my weight, and this will be making sure it's nice and pressed down for me. That looks good. And with Horween, you need to make sure you have a nice clean work surface, because that leather can, like if you put some weight on that leather and you have like a little schmutz of glue or something, it can put a permanent indentation in that leather. So, and now we just connect my marks. See, this is what I'm talking about. These Jetstream pens, one stroke and you got a good line. So Japan definitely makes the best stationery, and that is not exclusive to fountain pens. I'm a big stationery aficionado per my channel name, obviously. I love Japanese fountain pens. I really like Pilot fountain pens specifically. I think like the Pilot 742, Pilot Custom 742 might be like the best fountain pen ever made. Fight me on that. I think it's like better. In my opinion, it's like better than the 823. I like the 912. I have three pretty nice fountain pens. I have a Pilot Custom 823, Pilot Custom Heritage 912, and then the Pilot Custom 742. And of those, I think I like the 742 the best. It's such a great pen. And Pilot like makes super premium pens that even aren't fountain pens. You know, they make the famous G2, which I don't like, honestly. They also, also Mitsubishi is a great brand too. They have some great graphite pencils. So anyway, this is a little mini quilting square that I've put some paper on. And this is really quick for getting measurements like this. So we'll be using this 5/16 to get 5/16 of an inch of space here. So that'll be my fold over. So this will be going pretty quick. Obviously you can use a ruler, but this is how I do it. Now we connect our lines. There we go. I will dry fit my cover to make sure we don't do any dum-dum. Make sure I don't do any Make sure I didn't make any dum-dum errors. Looks good to me. All right, now we'll cut this out. This is where boys become men. Boys become men when you have to cut a piece of Horween. All right, so when I go to do this, I like to add about 1/16 over my cut line, because when you're skiving, you do want to kind of tidy up your lines to make sure they are perfect. So that's what this is about. And I use a craft knife or like a box cutter for this. I'm a big faithful Olfa Japan fanboy. This is a great cutter, as well as the rotary cutter is also from Olfa. I highly recommend their products. Napa lambskin's a really soft leather. It's almost kind of like a fabric. So the rotary cutter is great for cutting that material because it doesn't stretch it. So if you try to cut some Napa lambskin with like one of these craft knives, even if it's like pretty sharp, like a fresh blade, there's the tendency to stretch the leather, which is why I use a rotary cutter. But on the more firm cover leathers, I use this because if your leather isn't stretchy, this is, I think, a much more accurate way to cut leather, thicker, more firm leather. And I'm going to keep this scrap here because I'm going to use it for stamping practice when we get to that stage. So the one thing you want to obviously make doubly and triply sure is that you don't want to cut this line. You want to cut the second line. Because I've done that before. I actually did that on a piece of Horween in one of my recent rebinds, and I had to scrap that leather. Well, I didn't scrap it. It's big enough for smaller projects. It was a piece of Horween bison, and I cut on this line instead of this line, and that piece of leather, I had to essentially remark my cover, and I had to save, that piece for not a non-commissioned project, which I'm actually doing this month. So I'm doing if you're interested in purchasing a Bible from me, I'm going to be selling a few soon, and I have committed on the different leather options for that. So I have an ESV New Classic Reference, like the nice center column one. I'm going to be doing a ESV New Classic Reference in Horween Bison. So that text block fit that piece perfectly. So that's the plan. All right. Our liner is cut. So that is part 3 of how to rebind a Bible from start to finish. So the boring stuff is done. We're going to be starting to do the fun stuff here really soon. So we're going to be doing hubs. We're going to be doing stamping, etc. So definitely tune in for the next part. So thank you for watching. This is Ethan from Xfide Bibles.